Hello, everyone. We're going to get started now. So welcome to our presentation for today. The title of today's session is Integration Part 2, How ExpandIT Field Service Works with Microsoft Dynamics for Finance and Operations and AX. This is part 2 of a two-part series focused towards ExpandIT's partners. So my name is Gary Rodriguez, and I'm on the marketing and business development team here at ExpandIT. And today we've also got Michael Ferbata, who handles software development and pre-sales here at ExpandIT, and he's going to be the main presenter. So today's agenda is as follows. We're going to start off with a quick slide about ExpandIT, and then I'm going to hand things over to Michael Ferbata for the integration walkthrough. After that, we will allow some time for questions, and then we're going to wrap up with the next steps. And so just some info for you, if this is your first webinar, you can ask questions via text in the Ring Central bar, and we will answer those questions at the end. So just make sure your name is entered correctly, and you'll be able to ask any questions you want throughout the webinar. Also note that this webinar is recorded, so you'll be able to access all this information again later. I'm just going to give you a quick description about ExpandIT. So ExpandIT has got over 20 years of experience in the Microsoft ecosystem as an ISV. ExpandIT has a standard integration to all versions of Microsoft Dynamics, and today's focus is going to be, of course, on finance and operations and AX. We have over 4,000 customers globally, and we have a team of expert consultants in North America who are focused on sales, support, and service delivery. And we work with organizations who perform servicing and installations, and we help them maximize productivity and reduce their administration costs. So Michael is going to cover a few things today. We're going to first start off with configuring the data flow. Then we'll go into extracting and injecting data, and then we'll discuss data conversion. After that, we're going to talk about some of the best practices and special considerations for partners, and then we'll do a quick walkthrough of the ExpandIT infrastructure requirements. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to pose them throughout the presentation using the Q&A box in the Ring Central webinar bar. And now I'm going to hand things over to Michael to get started.
Good afternoon. So my name is Michael Ferbata, and we're going to be looking at how we integrate data with Microsoft Dynamics 365 for finance and operations and legacy AX installations. Throughout this presentation, I'll probably refer to each of these as the ERP system and only specify one or the other where it actually makes a difference in how we integrate or how it works. But otherwise, for the generic most part, it's going to be the same, and you'll see that throughout the presentation. To start off the presentation, it's good if we all get onto the same terminology from our standpoint. And so these are our basic pieces that we're going to cover, and a couple of these terms have already been used, so it's going to be good if we define them. So the first is what we call the BAS, which stands for our Business Application Server. Simply, it's our middleware server. It's the tool that is going to actually drive data in and out of the ERP system and communicate with mobile or web presence users. The extraction is the term we use, which is the process of pulling data from the ERP to the BAS. And the injection is in the reverse, from the BAS to the ERP. The last part is the concept of processing or conversion. Processing and conversion are the same term for us. They could be used interchangeably, but it's the process of manipulating the data once in the ERP from what we consider holding tables to the standard FNO or AX tables. And so those are our terms that we're going to cover. We're going to talk about the overall infrastructure of how our system works to begin with, and then we're going to talk about which part of this infrastructure we're going to cover today. So what you can see here is we have a BAS. That BAS, again, is our middleware server, and it sits within somewhere, whether that server sits physically at a customer location, is hosted externally from the customer, paid for by the customer, or is hosted by us. There are different offerings from ExpandIT. An offering called Essentials will offer for us to host for the end customer and connect into their AX or F&O implementation directly, but would be hosted by us, or they can host internally at their own site or pay for external hosting, but still maintain their own hosting environment. So that BAS server is a piece of middleware, and that's what the external clients are connecting to and communicating with. That server itself has its own SQL server. It doesn't have to be a separate machine, as indicated here. However, logically, it is a separate SQL server. It has separate data repositories than the ERP system. So if you have, say, AX on-premise, you have a SQL backend. Our BAS is not, for communication from external clients, is not reading back into AX in most scenarios. There is possibility of that, but in our general setup, that is not how it's set up. So we have this middleware database that goes along with this BAS. If we are talking about how we communicate from BAS down into the ERP, so we have an ERP system, we have AX. In this case, it would be AX proper installed on site. This is not an example of F&O integration. So we have AX is SQL. The BAS is going to ignore the AX application layer and communicate directly with the ERP SQL layer. So we are going directly to the SQL server, and we are reading data from SQL. We're going to talk a little bit about how we get data into the correct form within AX for ourselves, whether it's AX or F&O. But just understand that if it's AX on-premise, we're going directly to the SQL box. The injection and extraction occurs between that BAS and the ERP SQL box. It then stores what data it needs within the SQL, the BAS SQL. If we're talking about a cloud system, then it's simplified. We're communicating through a web service into the F&O installation. We're going to take a look at our tools, and the tools, whether it be for AX on-premise, F&O on-premise, or F&O on cloud, wouldn't matter. The tools visually are all the same, but we're also going to talk about the communication layer. The end result, though, is we still have a centralized BAS middleware server. It still has a BAS SQL server, and whether it's the connection with the cloud ERP or on-premise ERP does not matter at all. It could go down and the BAS can continue functioning, but with the last set of data that it had pushed or pulled. So this is the focus of the session, is the communication layer from the BAS to some backend, whether it's F&O or AX, on-premise or off-premise, hosted. So that's the focus of this session within our infrastructure. So let's talk about the process. How does the data actually flow? So the first piece is our extraction. So data is, again, extracted from the ERP. During the extraction, it's held in a holding table in the BAS SQL. So we have a BAS SQL box. The data is pulled out and held within a holding table. Once all of the data that we've asked for to come out to us has been fully extracted, the existing table that we have for that data within our BAS SQL table is dropped, and the new holding table is renamed. It happens in a single transaction. So the benefit of this is it enables us to have no downtime for mobile clients or web clients. They don't see it, it's seamless, but it allows us to ensure that we have the correct data from the ERP system at all times back to the BAS SQL. Within the same transaction for table naming, indexes are also dropped and rebuilt at the same time. We're going to take a look at how we configure all of this, how we configure the data that's coming out, how we configure the naming of the pieces, how we configure indexes. All of that's going to be looked at. So this is our process of extraction. So a little bit more visual, because it's kind of hard to visualize this. So data is being pulled from the ERP into our BAS. So one of the keys to how we integrate with either AX or FNO is we have our own views created within the system, within the ERP system itself. So we've created a set of views that correctly house the data for what we're trying to get. So a lot of the work, and this benefits a lot of the partners, because you can manipulate data coming to the ERP system without even making changes to the configuration tool, which we're going to look at later, simply by manipulating the views that we've created as part of our objects within AX. So those views can be manipulated, whether it's, again, FNO off, in the cloud, or whether it's AX on premise, it doesn't matter. You can manipulate those views to get different data to us. But in general, how does our system function? We have an ERP, we have these views, and we're not pulling all of the data. So this is one of the other keys. We might have additional fields that we don't need within the ERP system. And these additional fields may have, these additional fields don't need to be pulled out to us. So our views are already pretty cut down in size. So we don't have all of the same fields that, say, the customer record has. However, we do have some extra fields. So a good one would be an example of one of our views holds the rec ID. And this rec ID, we don't need it, but we need it as part of our view, as part of the joins. So what we're able to do here is we're able to have it in the view, not pull it out to our external table because it's not needed within our system. And so what you can see here on the left is our view within the ERP system, and on the right, the extracted table. So again, it extracts to this temporary table, and within our system, it puts in this $ extract, $ in the name, and pulls it out. So again, we have a smaller subset of data. We have fewer fields, so we're not pulling all data. We're only pulling what we want. And our BAS system does use different naming conventions than the ERP system. Integrate to multiple different ERPs. And as part of that, we have our own naming system, convention for different product. Well, here I use product table, but for different tables and fields within those tables. Once, as discussed earlier, once fully extracted, the transaction occurs to rename the table from the $ extract $ product table directly to product table. And nobody sees this. So essentially anybody who's querying product table from one moment to the next will just end up with an updated set of data that occurs. So what is the extraction process? Well, one of the biggest keys to this is it can include tables, yes, but for what we pull from FNO and AX, you'll see there's only a few direct table pulls, mostly pulling from views we've created within the system. We can filter that data at the ERP side, so we can run queries. We can run a filter when we're pulling data. We'll look at how that's set up. And the extraction of data happens on a timed basis. So within the system, there's a timed basis where data is pulled from the ERP system to the BAS middleware system. So this is the generic concept of our extraction. Sorry. So injection. So data flowing into the ERP system. We have data that flows back in. Again, that's from the BAS into the backend system, the ERP. Data is not intended to be injected into standard ERP tables. So we're not trying to take anything from our BAS system and put it directly into an AX or an F&O table. It's going to go into what we call holding tables, and that's part of our object. So when our objects are installed in AX, part of that includes not just the creation of the views, but the holding tables, also some code that will do the conversion, which we'll touch on later. Once injected, the data will be visible in the ERP holding tables. And then at which point you can open up through the UI, say through F&O, you can pull up our piece, you can view the data, and you can process it utilizing the code through some commands. So this can be automated or it can be done by hand. So just like the extraction process, we have the data for the injection is set up through the configuration tool, just like the extraction process. Again, not all fields that we create locally need to go back into AX or F&O. We have data that we have locally that may be very important for local, but not important internally to the AX. So it might be important for the web to process data, query data, find data, but not important for to process the data back in the ERP system. So again, our system uses different naming conventions, different data types, but this is all handled as part of the configuration and pushing data back in. So you can see here, we may have certain fields and names within the BAS, but when it goes back to AX or F&O, we have a different name for our holding table, and then we might have different names for the fields as well that would more accurately match probably the fields within the tables that's going to end up in. One of the keys is that injection does not include tables with a multi-field key. If you noticed in the last screen, we had a field called the BAS GUID. That's normally the field utilized. We have a couple of other options, but it's essentially an auto increment integer. But if you're pushing data from the BAS back into the back system to the ERP system, it's going to have to happen on a table that has a single field key, whereas you can extract data with a multi-field key. Injection can filter data, so not everything you have externally has to be injected. So a good example of that is you have data that has not yet been approved. You have data that has not yet been finalized by a mobile user, those types of things. And just like extraction, injection also happens on a timed basis. So there are scheduled tasks set up on the BAS server. Those scheduled tasks are set up to pull data and push data at different intervals. All right. So let's talk about the tools that actually perform this integration, that actually push or pull or configure the data to be pushed and pulled. The first one is the extractor. The extractor is normally installed on the BAS. We're going to stick with that as part of the setup, but there are other possible setups depending on security concerns. It communicates directly to the ERP system, and the extractor is specifically used for AX installations, on-premise AX installations. So we should have touched on that to begin with. So it's going to interact directly with the ERP SQL. The program extracts that data from AX to our BAS. It's a command line tool, and it's configured using a configuration tool, which we're going to talk about in a minute. The extractor is not something that somebody runs by hand. This is what's running by that scheduled task, running on a timed basis to pull that data out. Really, the key is that it's configured as part of that using that configuration tool. The injector, again, is specifically for AX installed. It's, again, normally installed in the same place as the extractor. Again, communicates directly with SQL. It injects that data from BAS to AX. It's command line, and again, it's configured by the configuration tool. So really the key here and the difference is now we're going to discuss F&O. So F&O, when you're connecting, it's connecting through a web service. And it's not utilizing the extractor or the injector. It's utilizing what is called the broker. This is, again, normally installed on the BAS. It communicates through a web service, as I just discussed, and it's published as part of our objects in AS, or in F&O, I apologize. The program that extracts, this is the program that extracts and injects that data. It, again, is command line, so it's not something normally used or seen by the user, but it is configured using the configuration tool. So what is the configuration tool? Well, the configuration tool, again, is normally installed on that BAS. Again, there's different configuration options for that. But it configures the fields and data that will both be injected and extracted from whatever backend ERP, whether it's F&O or it's AX. So the configuration tool will know, am I connecting to AX? So I need to utilize our SQL connection. I'm going to utilize the extractor and the injector. So, but the interface for the end user, and this is the key, is the same. So that's why it allows for an easy user interface. As a partner or as a customer who goes through an upgrade, if they've utilized this tool to make changes on their own, then it will look the same, and they will get the same look and feel, whether it's F&O or whether it's AX. Keep in mind, the purpose of the seminar is to talk about how the data is set up and the data to flow. This is not a seminar that, where we're talking about something that would be constantly adjusted. Normally, most companies will set this up and it will run until they want to make changes to their software. So, but the premise is as a partners may work on different customers, need to make different adjustments. But the ability to have one tool that has that continuous integration view, no matter what that backend is, and it handling whether it needs to use the broker or the SQL injector and extractor tools. That's really the key to the configuration tool. So we're going to take a look at the configuration tool here for a few minutes. And so I'm going to pull that up locally. And here we go. So what we're looking at is a configuration tool that is set to look at Dynamics 365, so F&O for operations. The backend type is what's selected here, and you would select either AX or D365 for finance and operations. Here, you can see that it's going to set up and you're going to tell it how to communicate. There might be an issue that you don't see my screen. Give me 1 minute and let me make sure that it's sharing correctly. Okay, so hopefully the tool will be visible. I just reshared. So I got a message that the tool was not visible before. Okay, so here we can see the tool, and this is where I was talking about just now. We can see the backend system, what's specified, and again, that changes. Based off the backend system, different requirements will be asked for how we connect. So here you can see we're connecting to our internal system and some internal information, and I've deleted out some of our secret keys and app IDs, but it's our internal testing system. So once it's connected, you can say test backend system. What that's going to do is it's going to communicate, whether it's, again, on-premise going through SQL or whether it's utilizing the F&O through the web service. It's going to communicate with the ERP system, and it's going to get a listing of every single table and every single view within the ERP system, and then every single field within every table and every view. And that can be utilized and seen in the Tables tab here. Within the Tables tab, we have what we call the backend table. And you'll notice here, we have multiple backends, and you'll notice some are marked for extract and some are marked for inject. You'll also notice that all of these at the top are marked for inject and extract because we utilize all of these. As we scroll down this listing, we'll get past the ones we use, and then you're going to start to see standard AX tables or views available. And at any point in time, one of these other ones can be selected. We'll take a look at that in a minute. So for now, I'm going to go back to the top, and we are going to look at the customer view that we have within AX. We can see the status of it is set to extract. So again, we can extract or we can inject. The tool will not stop you from injecting into a standard AX or F&O table. It is our policy that you would not do that, but it would not stop you from doing that. So a partner or a customer could absolutely make that change. The next piece is when you extract this data, where do you want to extract to? You'll notice, again, we talked about different naming conventions. So within AX, we have a view, EXP cust view, but when we pull it out to our middleware table, we are pulling out to something called the customer table. Down below, you will see the field listing. So on the left-hand side, you see the backend field listing, and on the right-hand side, you'll see the BAS field listing. And this is what I was discussing before. We might have fields available in the backend that we don't pull out to us because we need a subset of that data. So a customer might come to you and say, well, we have a custom field or an additional field within AX that we want to show out, say, onto a mobile client. Well, you can come here and actually just configure to pull that data. We're going to take a look at that. So on the left-hand side, we see the backend field name. The right-hand side, the BAS name. I can select a field, so this address field, and I can just say what I want it to be called. And I could type it in. Or if I didn't want to type it in, I simply could double-click on it, and it will take whatever the name was and move it across, as you see there. So what does that do? Well, moving forward on the next extraction of data, it's going to create that $extract table. It's going to add in the new field. And then when it does the renaming transaction, your table will now have the additional field. So what you didn't have to do is you didn't have to worry about data types. You didn't have to change any code in the ERP system to get that field to push out as part of that data. You didn't have to make a change in SQL. You didn't have to modify the extractor. It's going to read the configuration as applied from this configuration tool. And the real benefit here is it didn't matter if you connected to AX directly through SQL on-premise, because in that case, there would be no code change. But it didn't matter. Even if it was F&O, there's no change needed to our web service to get those additional fields out. The communication layer communicates with the web service, tells it what data it wants. The web service packages it and hands it back. So the web service does not have to be modified to get the additional data. It is all configured to this one tool. So as we look at this, we also discussed filtering. So on the right, you'll notice it also has an extract filter. And there is an extract filter set up here. We're only pulling customers where we have them labeled as is valid. You'll notice is valid is equal to 1 because it's a Boolean. So you can set up different filters, and it depends on the backend type that we're connecting to. So if you're connecting to SQL, the filter would be SQL based. So it would have the same syntax as SQL. Connecting directly into, say, F&O, it would be the same syntax used to filter within the UI of F&O. So the syntax, the filter does matter depending on the backend connection. But the benefit of this is you are filtering the data at the ERP side. So we're not pulling out extraneous data that we do not need and then deleting it, dropping it off, and wasting time getting it. We're asking the ERP system, please filter, give me what I'm asking for, and then I'll process on my side. We also discussed the pulling out and creation of keys. And on the top right-hand side here, you can see part of the extract properties is to create one or more keys. In this case, there's one key called PK underscore customer table. However, you can create additional keys. They don't have to, of course, you can only have one primary key, but you can create one or more keys. So this is important because this is the creation of indexes. So since our system is dropping existing tables and renaming them with what gets extracted, it's important that we rebuild the indexes with the correct data also. And that's what's set up here. So we set up keys. As part of those keys, we set up the fields within the keys. Again, extraction can have one or more fields as part of that extraction. In this case, this primary key has one field. So this is the general concept of having data that we can extract and how that is set up through this configuration tool. We also discussed injection. So you'll notice this is a table within AX that is part of our objects. And this table has been pushed in. It's a holding table. And it comes from our BAS table. So we have a table called sales header. And we push it into AX or F&O through the EXP Internet order table. So let's say that the customer says, well, we have custom data that we want to collect. We might create a custom field on the BAS side, or you as a partner might do that work. And then one would get created within this holding table within AX. Again, there's no code requirement change, however, to get the data in, whether it's through the web service for F&O or directly with SQL. The key here is that it is a configuration change. However, the field would have to be added, obviously. Our system is not going to dynamically add the field. So the field does have to be added within the ERP development environment. So simply, again, it's back-end field information. And on the right-hand side is the field it's coming from. And as we scroll down, we're going to see that this table has this one field marked as the key. Again, it needs one key. So why does it need a single key? Well, our system is designed to allow you to inject using different modes. And really the two most important modes are update and new, meaning only send in records that are new. It will keep track of what's been there before, send in only new records into the ERP system's holding tables. Update, though, will actually update values from the BAS into the ERP as they change. And that has a lot of benefits if you're trying to get incremental updates to certain types of data. However, to do so, we require a single field key, and that's where the requirement comes from for all data. I also talked about being able to filter, just like we can on extract, but filtering to the injection also. And you'll notice here that there's a SQL where clause. Well, again, our data is held in SQL. So our local filter on data to go in occurs within a SQL where clause. And you can actually see currently for this table, we're only injecting data where this field is null. Read only is 1, meaning it's true. That normally means it's been finalized. And our internal record action is not delete. The actual fields and the values don't matter. The premise is you can set a filter to get data with that has finally reached the specific state, and that's the data you can inject. Another key here is we looked at BAS injected as null, and that's because we can do something called mark source. Mark source puts a date time value into a field. In other words, we call it BAS injected. It just means when did we take it from the BAS and inject it into the ERP system. It gives us some of that accountability. We can go back and look at this and see when data flows. So we've looked at things already set up, and that's great. But what does it really take to say get a new table out? And so let's just say that we want to pull out this table here from AX. We simply could say extract. It's going to put in what it thinks should be the name. And so I'm actually going to change it So it's an accounting event. We've extracted it to the accounting event table, and I may only need 3 records here like this. I might only need the record ID and the source document and the event date. On the next extraction, I will have a new table called accounting event, and it'll have those 3 records in place. So I think that that's a very powerful tool, no matter the backend, whether it's SQL or it's in the cloud, to pull data of any type. And again, all data is available as long as it's in the ERP system. One other thing I didn't cover off is just one of the nuances on how this data flows specifically for AX and F&O is we also normally set up an extract filter for company. So we might see we might have a view that has information that spans multiple companies within the ERP system. And I thought it was in the customer view, but it must not have been. But in that case, here we go. This is a good example. We would filter, and how would we filter? Well, the data area would be the company name. We specifically only want the records that affect the company that we are interacting with within the ERP system. So we are capable of putting in this identifier for that. Where does it get this? It gets it from the prior backend tab out of company. So it'll take this value and create a filter to ensure that you only get that data in the backend. So you will see this occur in different places throughout our system, in not just standard tables, but within our views where we might pull data that might occur across multiple data areas within the tables. So this is the backend, so the configuration again. This configuration gets us to the data, it gets us the data out to the BAS, it gets data back into BAS, out of the BAS back into the ERP, and really makes that makes it simple for people to make those changes to flow data. So let's go ahead and go back. So now that we've talked about how data moves back and moves forth, we're just going to touch on a high level of what the data processing is. Remember, we talked about conversion or data processing being the same premise. So data is pushed back into F&O or AX and held in what we call holding tables within our objects. That data is then processed. So you have some reviews pages you can view, you can see the data, click an action of process. And the important part is that the data is then processed using standard code. It's pushed into the standard F&O and AX tables using the F&O and AX business logic. So essentially, by the time it gets over to the tables, it should look like it had been entered into them by hand. There should be no difference. All of the logic would be reviewed. There are some licensing reasons for that, depending on the versions of AX you're on. There's also some there's coding reasons, because as you, the partners, make changes to AX or F&O and business process changes, yes, it may change a business process, say on a mobile client, on a website through us, that we still have to make a code change for. However, you can validate that that data fits within it. So what we ensure is that we don't give back data that will either fail a process, say of posting, it won't fail a process, say of even just a page loading because of incorrect data that could fail. So in summary, what we just discussed in general was the expanded infrastructure. We took a look at that, configuring that data, how we get Extractor inject data either to AX or using the broker through to F&O. We've touched on the concept of how we take data, put it into holding tables, and then convert that data through automation or user intervention reviewing the data. Some of the special considerations I've gone over as we've talked about it, but specifically, I think the biggest one is the premise that we utilize views within the ERP system to pull the majority of data we need out. Meaning, yes, you can come in here and make changes to the fields that you want to pull, but you can actually make changes to the sources for the views. So if you have customizations, you can go in and modify our views within the ERP system and change what gets pulled out directly there without even opening the configuration tool. Lastly, just the concept of the best practices. The best practices of, we touched a little bit about filters and how that's used, how our system is normally set up where we have the BAS and that's what handles the communication. But again, that's customer centric. So that is what we normally see as our installs. It's normally what we do, but each customer will present a different infrastructure problem or different infrastructure requirements or security requirements, and we work with those and with those customers. And so I think, can't see the slide, but at this time I'll say, Gary, I don't know if there's any questions. If there are, we can take those now.
Okay, great. Yep. So thanks, Michael, for that walkthrough. There are a couple questions that have come in, so maybe we'll just take two of them here. So the first one here is, actually there's two of pretty much the same question. So is it possible to integrate with Business Central? What are the differences between how you do that versus finance and operations? Maybe you can just give a very brief.
It is possible to integrate with Business Central, and it's tool-wise, it is visually the same, and a lot of the processes are the same. So there's also a full integration video that discussed more about how we integrate with either Nav or Business Central, and that Gary can point everybody to that video, but that video is available from ExpandIT, so you can get more information on that specifically if you're looking for those integration types. The tools are the same, visually they're the same. There are nuances to things such as filtering, not needing to worry about getting data from different companies. We don't utilize views to read data, so there are nuances to those, but it is possible, and it's utilizing the same visual tools of the configuration tool.
Okay, thanks. And there's one other question. It's a little bit more technical here. So it says, if there were any issues while the extractor is running, do the tables that were extracted correctly get updated on the BAS or not? So
I guess I'm not sure if I'll be able to answer this correctly because I'm a little bit confused. So if there is an error on the extraction, my understanding is this: what happens on the BAS? Well, if you remember, not until the extraction is complete does it attempt to rename the tables as part of that transaction. So if you're extracting and there's a failure, say a network failure, can no longer get to the BAS, to the ERP system, say to AX or FNO, it's going to fail the extraction and it's not going to rename the tables because we don't know if the table data is complete. All that's going to happen is it will report a failure. It will report the failure if configured to do so to users or, say, an administrator within the company with the reason of the failure. And lastly, it's going to start again the extraction on the next time cycle. So again, it's a scheduled task, and it's happening at cycle F. So it may have failed now, but in 10 minutes, it's going to try again. And say it was a network issue and the network issue doesn't persist, it will succeed in 10 minutes. During that time frame, the BAS knows no different. It still has its original tables because the extraction did not rename the extract tables. So there's no difference to mobile users or to web users interacting with the BAS. So the BAS sees very very little downtime compared to the ERP system. Because if the ERP system goes down, the BAS continues to run. The BAS in general is a web-based interface, whether it's mobility or web or a website being run off of it. It does not normally, depending on the setup again, communicate directly back into the ERP system. So the ERP system could go down, and the extractions could fail all day. And the BAS will continue to run based off of its last known data from the last good extraction. So I hope that answered the question.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Mike. And so to the person who asked that question, I'll follow up with you after, just to make sure that's fully answered for you. So that pretty much wraps up our webinar for today. So if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. My contact information is up on the screen. And I've also got Luke's information, who you've probably already spoken with regarding any existing, sales opportunities that you have in progress. So again, just wanted to thank everyone for attending today. We'll also have another webinar coming up in 2 weeks from now. It's about communications and how ExpandIT will help your team with handling that. So the invites for that webinar are going to go out soon, so you'll receive that by email, and we hope you will attend that. And also the recordings from today are going to be emailed to you, so you can share those or rewatch them at your convenience. So thank you everyone again, and we look forward to seeing you soon.